The Justice Department tried to subvert President Trump. So I want to go back to the basics here for my listeners' sake. There's so much to unravel. Let me start with you. I'm a big fan of clarity. How did this begin? The Russian collusion story began as a result of, fill in the rest of the sentence.
My understanding is that a gentleman named George Papadopoulos interacted in London in the summer of 16 with a Australian intelligence officer and said something to the effect that the Russians had either Hillary's emails or dirt or some other signal that caused, because Australia is part of the Five Eyes, the friendly English-speaking intelligence agencies that share information and don't allegedly spy against each other, that which then shared with the FBI and the intelligence community of the United States, and that launched, I guess they say that's the predication for the counterintelligence investigation that ultimately should have been closed right before the end of the Obama administration.
So that's the genesis. When is the Steele dossier? What's the date of that?
Yeah, so the Steele dossier is being created, iterated, passed around, shared. I talk about when, Bruce Orr, who was at the Department of Justice, and in my book I talk about how he was suddenly transferred out of the Deputy Attorney General's office on the fourth floor of the Department of Justice, and how jarring that was to me, and how the Steele dossier was in the middle of that, because as you remember, Bruce Orr being a deputy in the deputy's office and being one of the key people at DOJ, that he had actually been the go-between between the folks that were creating the Steele dossier and the FBI.
Who created the Steele dossier?
A retired MI5 agent named Christopher Steele.
Why did he do that? On behalf of?
Yeah, on behalf of a company called Fusion GPS, which is an opposition research firm that had been hired by a law firm who was being paid by the Democrat National Committee and Hillary Clinton and her campaign.
And when was that payment made, or when was Steele hired?
That is something that my book doesn't cover, because I had to cut off so much of this story just to save trees, or it would have been a multi-volume book. But it was an ongoing project as part of the election of 2016.
Do you believe the Russians hacked the DNC computer?
I don't have any evidence of that, and I can't find anybody that does. My understanding is that is the presumption that happened, but I don't. All we know is that the DNC server was hacked, and that ultimately
who do you believe hacked it?
So I don't know.
Okay.
This is one of the things about being in law enforcement, Dennis, is I don't wildly speculate. I'm like,
that's fair. That's fair. All right, but okay. This is the following is a speculate question, but not about an individual. Based on your knowledge, which is very high up in American life, based on your knowledge, on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being decisive, 1 being irrelevant, the Russian influence on the last election was what number?
Not a single vote was changed because of their efforts.
So it was a 1.
And I talk about that a lot in my book, Dennis. It's just, we combated them in 2018. We demonstrated during the Trump administration how you do that. Expect the same, combating of those efforts will be in 2020. But their disinformation campaign and their attempted interference did not change a single vote, and nobody has any evidence that it did.
So that's another lie.
It's what the mainstream media has been feeding us and has been, as you know, combining the two things, the idea that somehow the Russians attempt to interfere in American elections, which they've done, and I talk about in the book, since the Reagan administration or even before, and the idea that somehow that Trump and Flynn and others were paid Russian assets. It's completely a farce, and has, again, it's been a false narrative, and it's a fable.
Okay, I'm sorry that I'm going to ask this because you don't like to speculate. If Adam Schiff were on a lie detector and asked, "Do you believe that there was Russian collusion with the Trump campaign?" Do you think he'd pass the lie detector test?
Not with what I've seen him publicly say. I think Adam Schiff is a completely dishonest actor in this whole story.
He's my congressman. Will you still speak with me?
I know you probably haven't voted for him,
Correct.
even though he represents you.
That is correct,
but,
yes. He doesn't represent me, yes. All right, we'll be back in a moment. Matthew Whitaker. Matt Whitaker is the former acting U.S. Attorney General in the Trump administration. 1-8 Prager 776.